Hey, Mike.
Yes.
It's Dan again. I'd love to hear a list of all the BS and beers that currently exist or are in process.
I think like most of the organizers are here, but let me find my, let me see if I can find a list of that. So building science groups, we have, and actually, if you guys are here and I have your name wrong, go ahead and speak up. We have the Building Science Discussion Group that Dan runs in Portland. We have the Building Science Guild in Vermont, Guy Payne runs as a function of SEON, the Sustainable Energy Outreach Network. We have BS+Beer Kansas City, Travis Brungard. I know Travis is here. Did I see Joe or Joe here as well?
Joe is here.
Okay. And yeah, I think you guys are probably as responsible as anybody for the BS+Beer idea blowing up because you're so good at social media and putting it out there. But just I appreciate your help. BS+Beer Tennessee, Chattanooga. Nathan Shirai, is Nathan here? I know he's signed up. No. We have the Berkshire County Building Science Forum in Western Mass. Brad Morse is one of the organizers there. Peers, Beers, and Networking, I believe is the best name. I think I saw Aaron Gunderson joined and Kate Stevenson.
Yep, I'm here.
Hi, Aaron. Is that the best name for you guys? I've also heard
We have building science for carpenters, peers, beers, and networking.
Okay, you guys win the longest title. And I think I saw. I know Kate Stevenson was planning to join, and Paul Eldrinkamp maybe.
BS+Beer Connecticut's here also.
Excellent. Is that Dave Seegers or somebody else?
Dave Seegers and Mason Lord.
Oh, and Mason Lord. Okay, hi Mason.
Hi, Michael.
I'll add you to that master list. We have BS+Beer Minnesota. Randy Williams runs up in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. I know Randy was on the list. I don't know if he's here yet. BS+Beer DC, Washington, DC is Dan Hines and Nick Berger.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you, Dan?
Good.
Dan works with Habitat for Humanity down in DC, and they just had their first event and just had their second event canceled like the rest of us. Then sort of more tentative sort of works in progress. They haven't had any meetings yet. BS+Beer New Hampshire, Ken Kiefer from SIGA. You might know him on social media as Tape Ninja Ken. They're planning to do one at their new training facility in New Hampshire. BS+Beer Adirondacks is Jesse Schwartzberg and Tim McCarthy. That's one that's in planning in the Lake Placid area. BS+Beer Puget Sound is Clint Hulsing. I think I saw Clint here somewhere. And there may be hi, Clint. There
just
you
getting
are.
Out of the fridge.
Okay, excellent. And there, it sounds like Emily. I think you know of another one in the Pacific Northwest, or was that just an?
Yeah, I was gonna say, Mike, are you on?
I'm on. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi there.
They're just getting started up where they are. I had him on the podcast. If you guys didn't check it out, Mike was on a couple weeks ago. Travis has been on. Randy has been on. Oh, I shouldn't say Randy has been on. Randy will be on tomorrow after 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. His podcast will go up and go live. And so lots of people on the podcast, but Mike is in Oregon. Did you tell me what you named yours?
Yeah, BS+Beer Bend.
BS+Beer Bend.
I'm in Bend, which is Central Oregon.
Nice. So that gives us, and is yours, have you, what's that? Yeah, so that's, what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's 10 or more groups around the country. So that's pretty cool, especially since they, half of them have been around for a few years, but the other half are all quite new, like roughly a year old. So that's great.
Emily, what was that podcast you were mentioning?
Oh, so I started a podcast last year called E3 Energy and Efficiency with Emily. And it's all about building science and architecture and being a woman in construction. It's available on Apple Podcasts if you're an Apple user, or on my website if you're a Android user, Mottram Architecture. I've been trying to get a consensus. So if people on here want to weigh in, I was going to send it to a Google podcast player because I know not everybody is Apple, but like typical Google products, there are like 10 podcast players and there's no consensus on which one most people use. So if I could get a consensus, I'd push it to a Google-based podcast player as well.
Is Spotify an option?
Yep. That has come up. Spotify, Stitcher. There is actually Google Podcasts too, I think, but I'm guessing that's only on Google-based phones. I'm not entirely sure.
So while Mike's doing that, can I just briefly invite everyone in attendance to join us here in Kansas City in September? On the 16th, we're going to have the first annual Midwest Building Science Symposium, and it's going to be free to attend. So if any of you can make it up, down, around, wherever you're coming from, I realize no one's planning travel right now, but it's going to be a different world in September. So please come down. It's an all-day event. The sponsors have already decided to cover the cost to make it a free to attend thing. So all you have to do is register at kcbsandbeer.org, and you can come to the event and eat great Kansas City barbecue and drink great Boulevard beer. Hear from Steve Basic and Jake Bruton about the control layers, and generally have a good time. So please come join us.
For introductions, we often will just go around and everybody introduces themselves, but I think we have too many people for that. So how about it, if you choose to talk or have a comment or question, how about just if you want to, just a brief introduction, where you are, what you do. Totally up to you. I'm Mike Maines. I'm a designer in Maine, and I started the BS+Beer Liberty in Liberty, Maine, based on the Portland group that Dan Colbert runs with Steve Constantino. I do stutter. So if I block, or if I look like I'm having a seizure or something, just wait a minute and I'll get through it and I'll loosen up eventually, but it just goes with the package here. If anybody, and then Emily introduced herself a little bit. Emily's an architect here on the coast of Maine as well. And yeah, I had a note to plug her podcast. The E3 with Emily podcast is great. Sometimes I'm on there, I'd skip over those, but they're
don't skip over those. Those are the best ones. We're going to start a new movement for those of you. I mean, I think I met half of you because I know Mike. So new movement called #AskMike.
Just a few ground rules. Thanks, John. A few ground rules. I think we've already gone over it, but just for the sheer number of people, and because it's so the computer is so sensitive to sound, if you wouldn't mind just keeping yourself muted unless you have something to say, as much as possible. I'll try to do the same. If you want to say something, if you have something to say, either raise your hand for real, try raising your hand on the sidebar, or you use the participant box, or just put a note in the chat. Emily's going to be sort of technical manager while I stumble through the spoken part here. So she's going to keep an eye out for anybody who wants to say something. If we don't get to you, or if we miss you, just wave your arms around like a crazy person and we'll try to find you. And let's see, we usually keep notes on a whiteboard or chalkboard. It's really a central thing of at least the ones that I've been to, which are mine and Dan's. If somebody wanted to take notes, that would be helpful, but I think we're not going to have a big board to refer to, and Emily is recording this, so I don't know if we need to do notes, but notes would be helpful if anybody wants to take some. And then I just wanted to thank everybody sincerely for coming. This is a strange new world we're living in, but a lot of people have been asking or begging for us to broadcast these. I know Travis has broadcasted some and bugged me a lot to get them out. I'm not technically oriented, so fortunately we have Emily who is, and maybe this will be a model that other groups can use as well. We welcome constructive, we welcome any criticism afterwards, preferably constructive, but as designers and architects, we develop pretty thick skin. So hit us with whatever you have for ways we could do this a little better next time. I mean, hopefully this is only a couple of months that we have to do this. We usually take the summers off anyway, but if this is a if this situation goes on for a year, maybe this becomes a regular thing. And I did just want to, I don't really have a specific toast, but I did just want to raise a glass to everybody and kick off BS+Beer Virtual.
Cheers.
Cheers. So does anybody have any other announcements? That's one of the ways we usually start. Travis mentioned the Building Science Forum. That's great. In the fall, Fine Home Building is putting on their second Fine Home Building Summit. Dan Colbert will be speaking. I'll be speaking again. Maybe somebody else on the list is. I can't remember. I don't think anybody else on the list is speaking, but we got a lot of good feedback from the first one, so I'd say I can say it was a success and a lot of fun. I think for everybody who went. I didn't even mind it. It was great. Does anybody else have an announcement, building science related, that they want to get out there? No? Excellent.
I got something.
Yeah, Clint.
Related, but we just recently are going to be donating all of our N95 masks that we're not using to local hospitals. Here in Washington State, we're getting hit pretty hard with the virus. So it's something to think about. If you have some extra masks, you might want to think about calling around either nursing homes, facilities like that might need them if they don't have any in stock.
Excellent, excellent tip. Okay, so the topic is preparing for the unexpected. We usually do a more of a specific topic like roof venting or foundation insulation or something like that. This is a kind of broad, but I think we can just make it an open conversation. What is the unexpected? We don't know. It's unexpected. That's kind of the idea, but it could be, say, a virus that sweeps the world and keeps most people locked in their homes for a month or two or longer. It could be a hurricane or tornado that causes massive damage. A few years ago in Maine, we had an ice storm that left people without power for a week or two or sometimes more in very cold temperatures. Across the world, we've had droughts and heat waves and wildfires, of course. Does anybody else have? Those were just a few of the sort of scenarios I thought of. But what else should we be thinking about, or in terms of not solutions, but what other unexpected things should we be thinking about? Anybody have anything else to add to that list? Sea level rise, that's a good one.
Go ahead and unmute yourself. We're going to try a little bit of free for all. So if you want to say something, go ahead and unmute yourself. So it's not just poor Mike talking.
Wildfires and earthquakes.
Earthquake, yeah, that's a good one.
For a total all around the planet, I don't know if there's anything worse than this.
Mike, did you mention floods?
I didn't. Somebody just said sea level rise, but floods is a good one. Yeah, so we have virus, hurricane, tornado, ice storm, no power, drought, heat wave, wildfire, sea level rise, floods, earthquakes.
How about global economic disaster?
Global economic disaster. That is definitely a good one. I'm not sure if we have a good building science approach to that, but you know, everything is comes down to economics. So that's we'll add that. All right.
Like
So,
Mike wrote Trump's second term.
oh, let's be realistic here. That's not. Yeah, that is one thing I've. As an aside, one thing I've noticed, attending the Portland group for 10 years, we would often have most everybody was of a similar political persuasion, and so we would often make liberal oriented jokes. And I found when I moved an hour and a half north into a rural area, the same jokes tend to fall flat. So let's try to stay away from politics, but everything comes down to politics as well. So there's only so far.
This is Elizabeth. How about concentrating more on multifamily and low-income housing than single-family homes?
Yeah, I think that's a good one for the sort of solutions category, Elizabeth. But yeah, I think that's an excellent solution. Well, so let's start with sort of the sort of acts of God type disasters. What are some of the problems we are seeing with the virus, or with other, or Australia just wrapped up, was it some number of months of wildfires, and what are some of the potential solutions to these issues?
Hey, Mike, as someone who doesn't get to use a lot of HRV, ERV filtration in our area,
yeah.
I'm curious what those filters are doing for you guys that get to install them all the time up there, in terms of wildfire, air quality. Potentially, could we be doing a HEPA filter in there that takes care of pathogens? Like, what's the level of improvement or benefit that already exists in that, and is that an avenue for improvement for those potential clients?
Yeah, so that would be more like along the lines of the virus issue. You mean, Pierre, about doing? Can everybody hear me? Did I just freeze? You guys all just froze for a second.
You did just freeze for a second.
Okay, and not just due to stuttering. It's so with HRVs and ERVs, we can basically, the less it's filtered, they often start around a MERV 7, I think, and that's just a basic level, like large particle filtration. Of course, as the filters get tighter, you give up efficiency, but you can get up to a MERV 15 or so, which is about HEPA level. So and HEPA level is surgical room filtration. I'm sure there's a lot more that goes into building surgical rooms, ICUs, but that's supposedly the level of filtration. I'm not sure how big a COVID-19 virus particle is for whatever they are. I don't know, but it's I know you can filter out a lot of stuff with a HEPA filter. Does anybody else have know more about it or have more to say on the filtration aspect? Feel free to just unmute yourself and speak up if you want. Oh, I'm trying to keep track of the comments here too.
Michael, I do know that as a brewing standpoint, that above 3% no viruses or bacteria can grow other than Acetobacter. So you're actually able to kill all, so you'll basically never get sick from beer. That's all I'm saying here.
So that's, I might disagree with that because I'm pretty sure I've gotten sick from beer before. But
well, that's alcohol. Alcohol is a poison for your body.
Yes, exactly.
And if you drink too much.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's 3% alcohol.
3% alcohol. That's why even the weakest of beers, the old German Berliner Weisses were 3%, because that was to make the the drinking water's safe.
Right, right, and you could drink them without getting drunk and still go about your day.
That's correct.
Yeah, but and Joe Nichols says virus filtration improves at about MERV 13. Not sure about COVID virus specifically. And so MERV 13 is a bit below HEPA level or right around there somewhere. Well, Dan, with that, I have seen that with the COVID virus, they're saying because the virus is wrapped in a lipid shell, that's why they want it, and it's got a charge. It basically sticks to your skin really well. And so even if it lands on a surface, if you touch that surface, it would rather stick to your skin, kind of like Velcro. And the soap, the saponification basically breaks that bond. It would rather stick to the soap. And that alcohol, it needs to be fully encased in alcohol at 60, and there's something about 60%. Do you know anything about that? Why they're saying that you have to have 60% alcohol in your sanitizing?
I'm just a home brewer.
Yeah.
I'm not a doctor.
Yeah, I am. I'm in a couple of home brewing groups, and I've seen there's one of the sanitizing agents is called Star San. It's I think it's an alkaline sanitizer. I'm not positive, but I've seen
That's correct. It's a phosphoric acid blend.
Okay. So it's acidic, but just it's used in brewing, and I've seen a lot of questions if that will work as a disinfectant against the coronavirus.
It does for brewing. I mean, I haven't had a bad batch, and I use Star San all the time. So
There
that's
you go.
5-star chemicals.
Yeah.
Yep.
Excellent. Quote of the day. What was the quote of the day, Dave?
The quote of the day was, "I'm just a home brewer. I'm not a doctor." Dr. Dan Rockwell. How's that?
Now, about 1,000 years ago, a home brewer was the doctor.
Right.
With fermentation practices.
Cures what ails you.
There you go. Yeah, so that was ventilation.
Mike, real quick, are you saying that are you aware that common HRV or ERV systems would operate fine with a 15 MERV filter in them, or that's available, or is that something to think about?
I'll try to be careful because I'm definitely I don't do enough projects to really be an expert in any one thing except like say wall assemblies. But from my experience, I'm quite sure Zender. I think Zender goes up to MERV 15 with their filtration. I could be off on that, but it's around that level somewhere. I'm not with the performance hit. They're passive house certified. I think they come at, it's either MERV 7 or MERV 11 when they come from the factory. And so that's what passive house assumes. But if you add a tighter filter, you're supposed to account for it in the PHPP energy program. I'm not sure about other brands. I've never tried to do anything tighter than what comes with it. I just know that's an option. Does anybody else have experience with ERVs and HRVs doing higher than a basic level of filtration?
My understanding is you can alter the system and you can add bigger filters than that come with like live breath and stuff is a basic filter, but you can modify it and make it work, but you just don't, of course, replace the filter with a bigger one. But yeah, there's ways of doing it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll add. I've seen Zender does go up to MERV 15. So you want to modify it in design stage, so you're designing the airflow and everything to that level of filtration.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Aaron. Aaron's director of Passive House Massachusetts. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So Aaron's a little more in the Passive House world than I am. I dabble in it, but he's an expert. Yeah, well, so just to stay on ventilation with any of these things, I know one of the questions that came up is if you're building a tight house, which we all should be, or know we should be, and you lose power for an hour or a day or a week, what happens with your mechanical ventilation if your house is designed to operate with mechanical ventilation and you can't ventilate for a week or two? Is that a problem? Is that not a problem? What are solutions?
Gate wrote, open the windows, but we just had this discussion, maybe Randy and I, might have been Matt and I, that who opens the bathroom window? Like that was a ventilation strategy. As long as you had a window in your bathroom, that would count as ventilation. But who opens the window when it's like negative 15 degrees outside in the bathroom?
Nobody.
Nobody. And if your power is out and you're in, maybe this is just us talking climate zone 6. I know there are some climate zone 7 people on here also. If the power is out and it is wintertime, the last thing you'd do would be open your window because you'd be trying to keep as much heat in as possible.
Right. Well, I mean, maybe that's an argument for you shouldn't build too tight, because when it's warm, you can open windows, and when it's cold, your house ventilates naturally more than you want it to anyway. So maybe we shouldn't be doing mechanical. Maybe we shouldn't be doing mechanical ventilation. Maybe that's the low tech method. Let the house breathe.
Don't design against those 1 and 2 time a year events, man. Come on.
Yeah. No, that's.
Yeah, Travis, Travis, wasn't it you that was down with Matt and you figured out that 3 ACH was like a window was 2 or 3 inches open? I don't know where you are, Matt. So
I'll let Matt speak to that, but yeah, his kids got that house down to like 0.5 something, and we calculated it on square footage, and it was super impressive. What was it, Matt? What did we figure? Like a envelope or something insane?
Yeah. Well, see, we opened the window 2 inches, and that got it to the 3. I'm sorry, I kind of missed part of that I was being talked to, but and what was it with at 3? Was it a full piece of paper?
That sounds right.
I think it was a full piece of paper hole punched in the side of your wall to be at 3 ACH 50, and then because we got down to the 0.53 depressurized and 0.73 pressurized, so. But yeah, the opening up that window, doing that little experiment was kind of cool, because now I can tell people that it's a good example to say, hey, if you just open a 5-foot window 2 inches, you're at code.
That's good. No, well,
the rest of the house is tight anyway.
Yeah. Well, that's one approximation I've heard is if you're in a cold climate like a zone 6 or zone 7, you can take your ACH 50 number and divide it by 17, and that gives you your natural air changes per hour. And if you do some math, you can approximate the size of the hole. So yeah, that's about the right size. Like in a passive house, your hole may be this big, and in a not passive house, it may be this big. In a code minimum house, it's bigger.
And that varies with the square footage of the house.
Of course, yes, yeah. That's where we don't. You usually do monster houses here in Maine. Most custom houses are like 2,000 to 3,000 square feet. Pretty good houses ideally would be smaller, but it's hard to get most people into a house smaller than 2,000 square feet. There are exceptions, but
Emily's clients.
Emily's clients don't get 2,000 square feet. No, you gotta go to somebody else.
Yeah. A couple of comments on the side here. Yes, so Ashley's saying Jamuha was talking about self-sustaining pocket communities. I know out in Seattle, Ross Chapin did the 8th Street pocket neighborhoods, and there's other, various co-housing approaches. Emily does some of that sort of on the greener end of development. Neighborhoods that aren't necessarily self-sustaining, but that are sort of more self-sustaining than a regular regular development. That's yeah.
Sorry, Mike. Emily, how much more would it take for the community that you developed to become self-sustaining? Would it be a long jump?
I guess it depends on what you define as self-sustaining. We don't process any of our waste on site. Well, I guess we sort of do. We have septic systems almost all of them are net zero or almost net zero. So it really, we have well water and septics, and they have, so essentially their septics have to be pumped, which isn't, I guess, exactly the same as totally self-sustaining, depending on, like, if you're talking living building challenge, we aren't like actually processing it. And they're all connected to the grid currently. So they have some, some power company connection, but they all have plenty of roof space to be completely net zero, and most of them are all electric with a wood stove backup.
Wow. Can we build some of those where I live, please?
I would build some of them where you live. You just have to find some more people. I think maybe this whole Advent, I know Mike posted about it online, is going to get people starting to think about sustainable communities instead, where you build a community around like-minded people who have similar interests. We've talked about doing, small house developments, tiny house developments, and, then the solar subdivision that I did is kind of like a family development, 3-bedroom, 2-bath style.
Yeah, and Jim Muha mentioned close to me is Geologic built a community. They do passive house, and they're getting into panelizing now, and they're also the ones doing the main-based wood fiber insulation, and they sort of made their name building a community of passive houses or near passive houses here in Belfast, Maine. And then Jim says there's another one going up near Montpelier, Vermont. Yeah, Kate Stevenson had a good had a good comment too about back to the ventilation is basically backup energy. So I mean, traditionally you could do a generator, either standby or gas or manual, but now there's the various battery systems. Tesla Powerwall is the best known. Is anybody using a Powerwall yet, or any of the competitors? I know there's a couple of competitors here in New England. Nobody yet.
We've installed quite a few of them.
You have. Hi, David.
Yeah. Hi. Sorry, I joined a little late. But I would say, I mean, we're kind of talking about the 1% of houses here in terms of, needing that level of mechanical ventilation. For most of us, we can get a fire going in the wood stove, and that has enough draw to pull in enough fresh air from outside.
Oh, wow.
Well, that's an interesting point. Yeah. So when a typical wood, or when an EPA rated, 4.5 grams per hour or less wood stove is running, it's pulling in 10 to 15 CFM, which isn't a ton, but it's enough that if you had a window cracked, especially, that would keep air moving in a tough spot. David, David works for Revision Energy, who does they primarily do photovoltaic installations plus other things. Are you guys doing a lot of PV with Powerwall off grid, or is it mostly grid tied?
The Powerwall cannot be installed off grid.
Oh, okay.
It has to have the grid connection in order to turn it on and power up. But we've installed a few hundred of them now between Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Maine, and then I know there's a lot more batteries from other manufacturers that are gaining prominence as well. But again, it's something that has not become widespread. But there's a lot of interest, and hopefully the prices will come down in the next couple of years as they become much more widely manufactured.
Right. The few times I've sort of started to price it out, I get the impression a Powerwall, like ballpark, is maybe $10,000 a piece, and you probably want more than one to run a house.
Yeah, usually installed they're in the $16,000 range, and now that includes installing a new Lumen smart panel. If you're not familiar, Lumen makes a smart panel that you tie into about 12 different circuits on the main electrical panel, and it's programmed so that it automatically shuts off
those circuits when the power goes out. So, you know, if you have a load of laundry running or something like that, you're not going to drain half your power wall while with the dryer before you realize the power's out. Those get shut off automatically. But then the Lumen smart panel has an app that you can use to turn things back on. So if the power's been out for a couple of days and you see your power wall is fully charged and it's a nice sunny day, then hey, maybe it makes sense to turn on the electric water heater and heat some hot water or do something like that to use the sunshine. But otherwise, you're not wasting energy on things that, you know, aren't essential.
Right. No. So when it's purely an economic argument, for $16,000, you could get a nice Kohler 14,000 kilowatt standby generator installed, and that would keep you running longer. But then you're burning fossil fuels, and it's a
well, with the federal tax credit, it's usually around 12 grand fully installed. And so if you're comparing that to a whole house generator that's automatic, it's usually in a similar ballpark. And when you talk about the fuel to run the generator on a weekly basis for test runs and the maintenance that's needed on those and stuff, there's actually a pretty strong economic argument for doing the Powerwall, particularly if you're putting in solar anyway. Clearly, if a house already has the generator in place, it's a harder argument. But when it's, you know, a choice of one or the other, I've seen a lot more people going towards the batteries and solar. And it's interesting because Generac bought out Pika, which was a local Maine-based battery company. They created their own inverters and battery system. It was the first major home battery system that was DC tied to the inverter. So there's no going back and forth from DC to AC to DC to AC with the like most battery systems do. And so, you know, it's more efficient in that regard. And Generac bought them out and moved manufacturing from Massachusetts to Vietnam, and apparently has brought prices down quite a bit. And I haven't seen the updated prices. As a company, we've taken a break from working with them for the last year, you know, just to see how things shake out with Generac. But they've certainly, I've been getting emails from Generac, and they're offering trainings all over the country and trying to, you know, push the batteries, solar plus batteries instead of generators. So that, I think that, among other things, is really going to help the battery market take off.
Nice. Does I know you guys don't do off-grid installations, but do you know if Pika, or I can't remember, isn't there another company in Massachusetts that's also doing these whole house batteries? Solaris, is that it? Oh.
Yeah, there's close to a dozen different companies now that are offering batteries. A lot of the inverter manufacturers are offering batteries now too. Solar Edge has a battery partnership, LG, and so there's off-grid options, and I'm just not as familiar with that. Before they got bought out, Pika was trying to figure out a way to be able to recharge the battery from a generator. Clearly, you know, plugging in a generator for an hour and getting your battery recharged and then using the battery for a few days is much more efficient than running the generator for hours or days at a time. And so trying to look at that. I see a comment asking about the end life for the batteries, and that's something that there's a lot going into the recycling. My understanding is that 90 to 95% of it can be recycled and repurposed, and they can reprocess the lithium and the different, you know, major components in it to reuse it. Similarly with solar panels, in France, and I think there's a couple places in the US now that are recycling solar panels, and they're like 95 to 98% recyclable, largely glass and aluminum and things like that. But it is something that comes up, and there's definitely a supply chain developing as the older solar modules are reaching that point, and the batteries are similarly, they recognize the value of the lithium and the major components of it, and it's better than most of our consumer goods.
Nice, thank you. Yes, I got behind on the comments here. You guys are active. That's great. Is there, yeah, Dan asks, what's the end of life for the batteries? Yeah. Your sound isn't working, Dan, sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
Oh, you are now. I think you just had to catch up for a minute.
Okay.
Nope. Well, anyway, so Dan wrote what is the end of life for these batteries, and I believe recycling batteries. I believe they can be recycled, or at least most of the heavy metals can be reused one way or another. It's not like they all go straight into the landfill, or it's not like they have to go straight into the landfill. But there's nickel metal hydride and lithium ion. And
can you hear me now? Is
yes,
this better?
that is perfect.
Okay, I put my headset back on. So my other question though is, not only am I a home brewer, but I also fly remote control airplanes. And one of the issues that we had with the early models of battery operated airplanes was lithium polymer batteries actually exploding. And I had a beautiful P-38 World War II airplane that caught on fire while I was flying it because the battery exploded. So what kind of precautions are we doing for, fire safing basically around these batteries, or is that even still an issue?
That sounds like a very realistic World War II airplane.
Oh, it was. It was only one engine went down. Flying a P-38 with one engine is very realistic.
Yeah, no, I mean they've largely solved those issues. I mean, you can look at history of Tesla batteries and things, and I mean cars getting into accidents, and they're less vulnerable than a gasoline powered car that has a tank of gasoline on board. And they've designed them, and they have all the I've seen a video that shows, I mean, basically superheating a Tesla Powerwall to demonstrate its fire safeness. And they one battery pack will be heated to the point that it is self-combusting and with the energy that's contained in it, and it doesn't light the other ones on fire. And I can't speak to the other companies, but certainly what was a cell phone a few years back that was exploding on airplanes and stuff like that? There have been some issues, but the battery manufacturers are looking at that very carefully to make sure that they're safe and meeting the life safety requirements for firefighters and that sort of stuff.
Awesome, thank you.
Amanda has an interesting question. Does anyone know if there are ways to connect to their neighbor's electrical source, given that we can't expect everybody to be in clustered communities? I mean, you can do a transfer switch, and maybe that's a building resilience thing, is that every electrical service maybe should have a manual transfer switch at least, so you could plug in a generator directly, or maybe that's also a way to get electricity out safely. Or really, actually, I mean, if you're plugging into your neighbors, Amanda, do you mean to run your entire house, or just to run one extension cord? Oh, you have to unmute yourself.
I didn't have a specific plan, but just, thinking, what if, you have something and you want to share it with your neighbors at whatever level you can? How do we set, how do we make this transferable? That's a great idea.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest problem probably is just the amount of energy that you have to move. It requires big circuits and big cables and things like that.
Okay.
You could stretch a single extension cord, for a couple hundred feet and run one or two things off it, but you couldn't run your whole house. Especially well pumps take a ton of energy. If you have mini split heat pumps, they take a ton of energy on startup.
Yeah, I mean, the grid of the future is going to be a series of community microgrids. And so having community-based systems that may not be able to power everything at 100%, but can provide 50 or 60% of the power for everyone's homes, where there's enough local renewable energy and enough storage to be able to power a whole town, or particularly hospitals and schools, which are typically emergency shelters and that sort of thing, being able to produce enough energy on site to power that area and even export to local places. There's a lot of work going on in microgrids, particularly in places where there's not investor-owned utilities that are preventing it from happening. And I'd encourage everyone to put all your support behind the consumer-owned utility effort in Maine before the legislature was paused indefinitely. That was the biggest bill going forward, and that is the single most important thing for having a clean energy future in Maine. Is there's no way that we can finance the future grid at 12 or 13% guaranteed profits for out-of-country shareholders. It has to be done through the low interest rates that can be achieved through a consumer-owned utility that can get bond funding at 3%. And so that is the single most important step that we can take in terms of transitioning to 100% clean energy in the state, is eliminating the investor-owned utilities.
Yeah, that's a good point for everyone not in Maine. Our electrical company was bought by an offshore company, and they've just taken a good company, and they charge like very high rates. They're double charging a lot of people. They're putting this big corridor through the most pristine wilderness in the country, or one of the most pristine wildernesses in the country, to bring power from Canada to Massachusetts, against the will of the vast majority of Mainers. It's basically become a really corrupt organization, and the oversight board is basically in cahoots with them, it appears, because they won't do anything about it. So just there's a move to try to bring it back to be a publicly owned utility, which is more like what it used to be before trust busting broke it up in the 80s. But yeah, well, let's how about if we move on from electrical stuff to we can talk about other building systems. We can talk about more on the community level of things. What do people want to?
There was a question a while ago, and I know we sort of lost track of it because there's a lot of great things going on in the chat box. First of all, Dan raised his hand, so if you have something to say, Dan, chime in. But there was also a ventilation question that came up, which was, how often are people training the people who either move into your homes on the systems that you put in, which is one of the biggest problems that we seem to have, is that they either don't know how to use the systems they have, they move into a house that they didn't use, or they turn it off and they never turn it back on. So that was way back to MERV ventilation, like back a while ago.
Yeah, but it's a good question. I mean, basically it's owner's manual. Is that something people are doing? And should we be even designing and building houses that are so complicated they need an owner's manual? Or can we design and build houses that don't need an owner's manual? Does anybody else do owner's manuals? I know Dan does. I always talk about it, but I've never actually done one.
Yeah, we do owner's manuals, but I also think that like a bathroom vent fan is not rocket science, and yet they still don't get used. So I don't know.
Yeah. Jesse Ware says they're mandatory. that's
We're going to do one for our build. And this will be the first time I've ever done that, an owner's manual. But as far as, Emily and I talked about this the other day, was, once we give the house away, how do people use it? But at the same time, what's the thought on putting those smart timers, smart switches? I mean, I know we can only get so smart when the person has to kind of step up still, but I guess there's always that option to try to make it as foolproof or homeowner proof as possible, I suppose.
Yeah. Are you planning to do a physical binder, or are you putting it on a CD or thumb drive, or what's your plan?
Right now, probably do a binder. Jake Bruton does a nice little video explanation of what he does on the Build Show Network. He just did that, I don't know, maybe a month ago or something. He talked about his, and I was thinking, and I think he also does a digital one. Is that right, Travis? I'm sure you've seen it.
He does. His binder is old school for the client to hold, and then he duplicates it and keeps it in his office. So if they call him with questions, he has the reference. But then in the front pocket of the binder is a thumb drive that has it all on it as well.
So I thought that's a pretty good idea. I mean, everybody's digital, and you know, hey Liam, if I could maybe, you know, even if I had like a website thing with our school building program, I could maybe even put a link on there so they could even access it later on. So if that stuff ever got lost to the next homeowner or something, I don't know. But this will be the first time we'll make a manual. And so I'm kind of interested to see how that all goes. But yeah, Jake Bruton does a nice little resource video on that. And it's, I mean, I'm sure his is pretty in depth, and I think he's had like everything from receipts and everything to it. So his was very transparent.
Nice. And Mike Horgan builds in San Luis Obispo. Is that how you say it, Mike? And he's doing
San Luis Obispo. You can't say San Luis Obispo.
Okay. That's I need to visit it. If I visit it, then I'll lock it in until I visit it. I'm never gonna get it.
Yeah. Originally from Cape Cod, though.
Right. Yeah. So you're planning to do yours as a PowerPoint. That's an interesting.
Yeah, we're gonna do two of them as in PowerPoint form to hand over to the owners.
Mm-hmm.
They're both very tech savvy Palo Alto homeowners.
Right. High tech.
Yeah, I think the thing I was gonna say is like we do a binder and we do a thumb drive, and I mean my fear is that it just sits on the shelf somewhere, and maybe if you're lucky, it gets left in the house when they move out 20 years from now. You know, one of the things that I'm also a big fan of is like trying to actually put, you know, get a label maker or actually print something out that's like taped onto the itself. So that like this must you know, these filters must be changed every 3 months or something, so that those things are labeled and there's information on the actual units.
Something I picked up from like the whole being lean and stuff. Fast Cap, is it Paul Akers? Anyways, the owner of Fast Cap company, he's big into lean and stuff. And what they've done, I think they even have one of those QR codes or whatever. And so you can take your phone and highlight it, and it'll bring up, for him, it brings up in a instructional video how to handle everything. So, you know, to that label example, if you put those little RQ or QR or whatever codes, and then somebody could just snap it with the picture. I mean, who knows what technology you'll have as time goes on, but then it actually goes to a video. And I thought about even doing that depending on time frame, where it shows, you know, how to change out the filter or whatever. I thought that was a cool idea I've seen before. That could be something, you know, go along with labels. And also what they do is in their factory, they have like little 7-step diagrams or whatever. Like everything has to be done in 7 steps, and it shows how to do all that stuff with pictures and everything next to the whatever item furnace ERV.
Amanda, you've had your hand up for a while. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm a huge culprit of not running my fans and letting condensation sit and develop mold. And I think, you know, education and helping people understand why they would want to do things, what that condensation means, what it's doing to the health, to their health, what it's doing to their building. It's really important. Those aren't obvious things that I think most people know, that, you know, yeah, it was cold out overnight, there's condensation in the morning, so what, you know. So helping to build that so what through infographics, visuals, helping people understand what that means. So that's one side of the thing, like build the why. And then in terms of managing humidity inside, I mean, I love all these ideas here about automation. I mean, the best thing is to make it the default to run the fan. People aren't going to change something that it's defaulted to. So that's the easy win. But then behavioral feedback, like, so making humidity levels visible in the house. If you do have sensors, making, you know, something as visible as the temperature that tells your humidity monitor, giving people a target and then giving like positive feedback, like how Nest gives the, you know, sends monthly reports on how you did for managing energy. Is there any way you can give feedback to people about how they're using their homes? Like, oh my gosh, you were so awesome this month. Like you kept your humidity level below this level for, you know, this many days or something.
You get a prize.
A feedback loop sounds great. Dan Hines and Dan Colbert and Mike all had their hands up too. So I don't know if you still have something to say.
Yeah, I know. Dan Colbert has been monitoring walls on a couple of projects. So I wonder if he might be able to talk about that, like what happens in the wall. And what is and he also uses the Sense monitoring system, so you can see to some degree where energy is going.
Yeah.
Where'd you go, Dan?
Sorry, I thought my screen was frozen.
Oh.
So I just wanted to say that we have been doing a lot of monitoring for the last few years. We've been using the OmniSense monitors, which you can vary. And they will tell you like relative humidity and wood moisture equivalents and temperature. So they put them inside various walls. But the other thing that we just started doing on our current project is a CO2 monitor. So that's a really good way for you to keep an eye on what's going on in the house. Obviously, if there's no power, it won't work, but certainly a good way to see how air quality and things are going over time. We also, another cool thing about the Lumen panel is it allows you to monitor consumption by circuit. We also used, we're also using this new Leviton panel, the smart panel that allows circuit by circuit monitoring right in just by this special circuit breaker, and allows you to monitor consumption that way.
Dan, the sensors I've used were not, I would not call them user friendly. Would be the last word I'd have for them. Are you finding the ones you use, are they relatively straightforward? Are they straightforward enough for a homeowner to use, or are they for techie carpenters, or can any builder use them? What do you think?
I think they're pretty easy. I mean, you know, once you install them, I mean, you just get data and you can set, you know, it spits out a chart. It spits out an XY graph for the various things it's monitoring. You know, you need to know, obviously you need to know what the numbers mean. You know, what number relative humidity is the danger zone, what number wood moisture equivalent is the danger zone. But in terms of the data that it's spitting out, I think, you know, with a little education, anybody can see it.
No, that makes sense.
We also had a Foobot, which was pretty good too. They're obviously, you know, I don't know if people know, but they're revamping their whole product line. So they're not actually selling anything right now, but I guess they're relatively soon, they're supposed to have a new residential and commercial line coming out. And that's just air monitoring. But we got good data from that too.
Okay.
We put them in the client's bedroom for a job we did with Mike, actually.
That wasn't something I spec'd, but I supported the decision. Aaron has a comment or question.
Oh, I was just going to show, actually, I have one of these sitting on my desk right now. So this is, get in front of the camera, an air quality monitor that has humidity, particulate matter, VOCs, and CO2. It's kind of, I think it's hard to read the screen, but you got different numbers and you can cycle through it. But you can get different models of these even off Amazon for $100 or so. So they're perfect. I think even homeowners can use them really easily.
I have
Is that inside your house?
Yeah.
That PM 2.5 seems really high, or maybe I don't know what is there a decimal point in that?
Right. So, all right, I'll show it here. So that right now is showing a 9. Is my camera flipping it around? Now it's up to 10. So it's low.
Gotcha.
Is that?
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
How much do those go for?
They make different models. They're $100 to $200, you know, in on Amazon for different ones. Yeah, and I agree with the person who said that you need to know what the numbers mean. I think that's because you just said that. Now I'm questioning, like, is that dangerous? Is
No.
that a bad number?
Yeah, that's a okay number. That's a low number. I have a Yoo-hoo. I don't know if you've seen them, UHOO, and you can look at it on your screen. So it goes to if you have Wi-Fi. So this is again one of those Wi-Fi capability ones, and my parts per million are 6, and it's showing me a nice green healthy dot. So I think 10's perfectly fine.
Going back to the manual or like leaving information, it's really important to have the contact information for the manufacturer or installer. When I sold my house in Reno, I provided them with all sorts of information. We transitioned it to, well, we operated it at net zero energy for a year, but you all probably know that that's just a matter of the occupants as much as the technology in the house. And I stopped by and visited a year or two later when we were in town, and the solar inverter had tripped, and he hadn't called the installer. And so, I mean, I don't know how long he'd been living there without the solar working at all. And it's the sort of thing where having the contact info for the installer and how to have someone come out and take a look at the equipment. But there's a lot of things that there's not really maintenance programs set up for high-end homes and how to take care of them unless you either have it all done by the same installer or have contact info posted with company name and phone number and email address, website, that sort of stuff on the equipment, so people know how to get it repaired.
I have something to add to that. This is John. I work for Emerald Builders in Maine, or High Performance Builder. One of the things, so we're working on doing the homeowners manuals as well, and we do it as a combination of a Google document that we can send. We can turn into a Word document that's static, but that we can also have a live document that can be edited as homeowners use the homes and then sent to them. And then we also do Google photo albums, and the photo documentation of the process and where blocking is, and electrical and how to clean your, we take pictures of the like the vent installation, so they know how to take off a vent to clean the screen and stuff like that. And you can put comments in the photos so that they can be looking at the photo and be like, oh, how do I get into this thing again? What Allen key do I need, etc. And then we're also playing with calendarizing maintenance. So, like we put Zenders in usually, and Zenders after the first 3 months need, they need to get that first filter changed. And so you can just put it in a Google Calendar for yourself, for the homeowner, and then you can go out and do a training, which the training consists of open the filter board, put the filter in. But we just did that with a client, and it was great because we had told them all this stuff a few months ago when we finished the project. And, they're just so full of so many other things that they just, they're like, how do I do this again? So it gives you that opportunity in that first year, especially, to just be like, yeah, we'll stop by. No worries. We'll check on stuff, see how it's going. Here's how you do your filter, and you can do that. And you can do refreshers on, here's how you read your PV display, on your inverter and all that kind of stuff. So whatever systems you have that really are held to a calendar every year in terms of the maintenance they need, put it in a calendar and use it as an opportunity to train the homeowner and connect with them and make sure that all the systems are working properly.
Joe Nichols has an interesting comment. Does anybody else, do any other builders also provide long-term maintenance agreements? I've thought about that in the past. It seems like it's a way to keep an eye on the house you build for them. Nope, nobody.
I don't do a regular maintenance agreement, but I do stay in contact, and and you know, I visit. I start with 6 months, then 12 months, and then it tapers off a little bit more than that. But I definitely make often trips and kind of see how things are going, for sure.
Okay.
I think there's a couple of guys that are kind of famously doing that. I think it's Jackson Andrews has a high-end maintenance agreement. And I also think Monticello Homes in Springfield, Missouri, that guy, Jason, does a good job with that, where he just basically got sick of fixing things that should have been maintained. And so he just made it part of his deal. And for higher end homes, I think that's an easier sell, especially where you have more complicated equipment and people are usually already enthusiastic about investing in that equipment. And so they care about how it's going to keep running. In your middle market homes, that's a harder sell. And for that application, I think you're better off to push sort of the, you know, not to go negative, but if you push the negative side, like to keep your warranties in force on your home and products and systems, you must do this scheduled maintenance. And I love the idea of offering it. John, I think, said the Google Calendar. That's brilliant. I mean, that's super easy. It kind of can handle itself. So that's a really good idea.
Yeah, it's kind of following car dealership models where you get a warranty as long as you do your scheduled maintenance with them, and any callbacks or, you know, or any or whatever they are, you know, safety callbacks you go to the dealer for. And so it makes sense that with the higher end house, it's like a higher end car, you want to go to the dealer. If you're buying a used car for $5,000, you're probably not going to bother with a dealer or a high-end service agreement.
Yeah, it's tricky as homes change ownership, though, to follow that track. We definitely have a lot of solar arrays and different systems out there that now that someone else owns the house, you know, like we certainly service all of our equipment and make sure that things are running. But just trying to, you know, from the installer perspective, tracking that and having, you know, there's not databases or things set up to be able to follow that chain of ownership over the years and make sure that things are working well. And then the other side of that is there's a lot of older manufacturers that have gone out of business. And so we end up servicing other people's heat pumps and other people's solar arrays because they're no longer there. And, you know, having reputable service companies to deal with a lot of that equipment that's out there that, you know, the installer or the manufacturer goes away over time, and making sure that those things are taken care of. And there's a whole new generation of technology going into homes that, you know, most older homes don't have, and most people have very little idea of how it works. I've talked to several homeowners that have ERVs or HRVs and have said, oh, I just shut it off because I didn't know what it was doing. It didn't seem like it was doing anything. And so, you know, clearly, you know, we've missed the boat on the education and informing the new homeowners and providing them, you know, information about what's there and how it works and how to keep it running.
That's a good point. I started to hide the ERV control in the ERV cabinet, so that way they don't mess with it. If I have a client that's actually super into the building science, then I'll make it more accessible. But the HVAC contractor and I said, hey, let's set this the way it should be, and make it a little harder for them to get to. Because yeah, I found the same thing. I go back and I see that it's off. It's like, whoa, don't do that. That along with, I have my HVAC contractor do a full walkthrough with the new homeowners, and that's what they sell, a maintenance program. So it's an opportunity for them to do that, but it really gives them really good knowledge base of what the system does and should be doing.
Yeah. Russ Chapman says, I would love to see a program like that for windows and doors. Russ is our regional rep for Sierra Pacific Windows and Doors. What would you imagine, Russ, would work well for you guys? I'm surprised you don't. I mean, you guys must have service people, but you don't have a regular service agreement. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, so I mean, as a window and door manufacturer, typically we put the onus for service on the distributor of the product, and you know, I don't think it makes much difference which company you're working with. That sort of makes things a little bit awkward and can lead to difficulties. So you know, I've forever been kind of beating the drum of trying to figure out a better mousetrap for how to take care of this stuff, because it doesn't matter whose windows and doors you buy. There's particularly in the wood and wood clad window business, you know, there's going to be adjustments that are needed. There's going to be issues, just the nature of the beast. So coming up with a, you know, I don't want to use the word idiot proof, but for lack of a better term, I'll use that term. Way of addressing that stuff is, I think there's a lot of benefit to that, and you know, anybody who's ever had a really bad experience with windows and doors would tell you that they probably would have been happy to pay a, you know, a small, you know, a few percent here or there as an insurance policy, let's say, to make sure that everything's taken care of, much like you would with a high-end car, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and Lillian, who's a designer builder with her husband Patrick in New York, says Big Meister, who's based in Newton, Mass. Yeah, it gets a lot of new work by going to their past jobs, so it's a way to drum up work, which may be something we need to, you know, builders especially need to think about more in the near future than we have in a few years. Just by going around to your past jobs, you can often drum up some sort of project. Does anybody else do that as part of their marketing, or have most people not been worrying about marketing with the busy economy?
We do, but usually, you know, looking for referrals from past customers and things like that. And so we try to follow up with people a month or two after the system is installed to see how things are working. And that's for those of you out of state, we install heat pump water heaters, solar, EV chargers, and then battery backup systems. And then we also send all our, well, at least out of our shop, I don't know if the others are doing this, we also send people a postcard like a year after their system, and, you know, just thank them and let them know that we love referrals and that's how the world turns in Maine. And that seems to work pretty well. And most of our customers come from word of mouth, even though we do a lot of advertising on various platforms.
And you're also an employee-owned B Corp, which is super cool, with like 200 something employees at this point.
Yeah, 260 employees that we're trying to keep all employed through this interesting period we're going through.
Yeah. Well, we can keep talking about sort of technical stuff. Kurt, who's an architect and builder in South Portland, just wondered about sort of more generally what are people thinking or planning here. So it's slightly off topic, but it sort of blends in. If anybody wants to talk about it now, or we can just cover it before we go. Does anybody want to talk about that? So more of a business, more on the business end rather than a nuts and bolts thing. What are you planning to do here to keep your business going, keep your employees employed? It feels like the elephant in the room, Kate says.
Crickets.
Yeah.
I can speak a little bit to that. I don't want to hog the conversation though.
Yeah.
I can say what we're doing at Emerald, but it's useful.
Yeah, we've transitioned to a lot of commercial projects where there's very little customer interaction to keep our crews out on rooftops and working. And on the sales side of things, we're doing some in-person site visits and checking with the customer first, and then avoiding any direct contact, no shaking hands and stuff, and starting to do a lot more like video conference type site visits and meeting with people virtually and trying to figure out enough about their home to get all the details that we need. But it's definitely tricky, and we're hoping that, you know, with the early spring, we'll be able to start transitioning to ground mounts and outdoor systems and keep our crews busy outside so they can keep working without having to be in people's homes every day.
Yeah, and John, what are you guys doing at Emerald? Do you have what, 4 or 5 employees now total?
Yeah, we're a company of 6. We have a operations manager, and then there's 5 of us in the field. I'm marketing director 1 day a week. Reggie, who owns the company, is also a working carpenter, and then we have 3 crew of carpenters exclusively. And so starting on Monday, we began our self-quarantine. And so what it means for us is that our crew is, you know, we basically we're paying for the next 2 weeks just to keep people home, keep people out of society until we figure out where this is going to go. And then obviously we're looking to see what happens financially for employees in terms of unemployment or, you know, keeping benefits going forward and that kind of, so we're just trying to solve those puzzles right now. And what we're doing in the meantime is I'm basically running Emerald University for the crew. And so we're doing this every day. So Reggie and I are sending out articles. Our crew are finding articles to dig into building science, assembly methodologies, different assemblies, you know, different energy models and ways of looking at all this stuff just to deepen understanding, the hope being that when we get back on site, we're just that much more ready to go. We've got our crew right now is relatively new to the company. Everybody's come on in the last 6 months. And so it's a chance to, you know, deepen the understanding in the company and what we do and how we move it forward. And so we're trying to make use of that time. It also keeps us connected. We're not using Zoom, we're using Google Meet, but it's this effective thing so that we're having 2-hour discussions every day. So everybody's going off and reading, watching videos, sharing links, all that kind of stuff, and then presenting to the group on what they've learned and we discuss it and talk about pros and cons and the business aspects and assembly and all that kind of stuff. And then in the meantime, for us, Reggie is just he's gonna keep sort of pushing projects forward on his own since he's just one person. And we've got a project that's uninhabited right now. It's a remodel, but the people are out of town for probably months and months now. So he can sort of safely go there as one person and kind of keep the fire burning, keep some revenue stream coming in while we sort of wait and see what happens. So that's kind of where we're at. And we know a lot of our peer companies in the state and around New England are doing some variation, and it seems to be very dependent upon what people have for work. You know, if it's an outside framing job where everybody can stay like 10 feet apart, sanitize stuff, and nobody else is around, people seem to be working. You know, I think if you're in closed spaces, it's not a good idea to, you know, you can't socially distance. So that's where we're at.
Right. No, that's a good approach though. How long do you expect to be able to keep that up before going to layoffs or something like that?
Yeah, I don't know yet. I mean, so much of this is about wait and see. I mean, you know, from everything that we're trying to read about everything every day, and if you read the report from the British health specialists and you read some of the stuff that's a little more forward thinking, you know, we're 10 days to 2 weeks maybe away from like a national lockdown. You know, right now it's essential services. Construction in Maine, construction is considered an essential service. So a lot of work can legally continue right now, whereas restaurants can't have dine-in service and things like that. But it looks as though all of that's going to be greatly diminished in the next couple of weeks. So we're trying to just brace for that and see what, one of our biggest things is to try to figure out how we can, you know, take care of our crew, make sure that, you know, they can survive through everything and that the company can hibernate and keep enough of a trickle of revenue coming in to be able to weather the storm. But I think that's a challenge we're all facing, isn't it?
Yeah. We shut down our job site on Monday, and construction is also considered an essential service in New York, but the nature of our current project, it's just not realistic. There's no way we can keep everyone safe, and hygiene also is just not realistic. And on Friday, the state's shutting down all non-essential business as well. So yeah, but we do have some sick time for our employees, but I've been sort of waiting to hear what the state is going to do. They've been talking about passing a bill for extra relief, but the information is coming through really slowly, and one of our employees did just file for unemployment, and so it's scary because we haven't laid anyone off. Our client has assured us their money is intact and will be resuming, but it's going to be months, and I just hope everyone is realizing wherever you are in the country, New York is really the most hard hit state right now, and what we're experiencing now is what you will be experiencing next week. At the same time, I just talked to a painter we know. He called me just unrelated about something, and he's telling me about all the work that's got lined up, and I was like, really? Like, he just hadn't been paying attention. Like, he knows there's this virus, but he didn't, he wasn't really aware and planning for what's coming or what's here now. So, and anyway,
what is one thing I was thinking is if this kind of thing is helpful, just as almost like a peer support group, I think we could do it more frequently and maybe stray a little more from building science if people felt that was helpful. I don't know if we're going to solve anything, but at least it's moral support that we're all in more or less the same boat. So if people are interested, we could do that.
I nominate John to provide content that Emerald Builders has shown all of their people.
Yeah, does anybody? Jim Muha actually raised a hand. What do you got, Jim? Oh, yeah, unmute yourself, Jim. Jim, you're muted.
Gotcha.
There you go.
Gotcha. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, if folks don't know, I work for Rotoblas. We're a company based in South Tyrol, Italy, which is essentially in the epicenter of where this is all going on. So one of the things that you have to be cognizant of is, product coming over from overseas. Right now, the supply chain is consistent, although there are some shipping costs that are coming over from Europe that are outrageous, and I think it's just a matter of availability of planes coming over. Containers, if there are containers coming over from Europe, I've spoken to a couple of the European-based companies that are importing building materials here, and right now, it's going non-interrupted, and it's it's a wait and see type of situation. We just don't know how it's going to change. Our group in Cortaccia, Italy, we're all working remotely. We're pretty tech savvy. Our whole technical engineering staff is working remotely. We're doing Teams meetings. We have a full suite of Microsoft solutions, so we can do that thing. My colleagues there tell me if this happened 2 years ago, we would be in a lot of trouble because we just didn't have the infrastructure and the architecture to do the type of communication that we need to do. We have a skeleton crew that's working in the warehouse and shipping out product. And, as far as the perspective of job sites, I think it's really a mixed bag. There are, and the folks up in the Boston area, I think they, some of the larger sites have been closed down. New York is considering closing down some of their larger sites, but the residential projects seem to be moving along, just like folks were saying earlier that these homes that are being renovated, being built, it's not like you can just stop midstream and just stop everything. So they continue on. The panelized companies, you know, if they have crews that are going out to install panels, you know, the question is, where do they put their guys and gals that are working on site, as far as hotels and you know, and as far as restaurants, you know, are there going to be the available services? So there's really not one, you know, kind of situation. It depends. So from a, you know, from a supplier point of view, it's, you know, it's day by day, week by week. So we'll see how things transpire.
Yeah, my husband works in the home, sort of like lumberyard type stuff, and they're having the same problem. Is that unfortunately, if one maybe it's just in Maine, but we don't seem to have as much testing here. So the doctors are just telling people to stay home, and so they're getting 4 trucks a day, and they can't unload them because they can't do anything with the product that they're getting. So I think you're right on the whole supply chain thing. Is, you know, right now everybody's getting it, but if, you know, bigger companies or factories don't, you know, can't unload it, can't ship it out, we could have, you know, could have all kinds of things that happen with getting the materials.
And coming from Rockwell Insulation or Roxol, so far currently we're a global company, so we did have to shut down 2 factories, one in Spain, I believe, and one in France. So currently we're not seeing any slowdown whatsoever on the US factory that we currently have, and also the 2 Canadian factories. Those are still going. We're not having any issues with customs and bringing it into the country. But that being said, our Mississippi plant down in right just south of Memphis, that also has capacity which far succeeds what we're currently producing out of that facility. So that's one in the U.S. And then also our new plant, which still is not in West Virginia, that one's not really hitting the supply chain until for about another year. So that's really it for Rockwell.
No,
I wanted
thanks, Dan.
I wanted to add something. Yeah, I wanted to add something here that the other aspect of this for us as the building company is the subcontractor aspect. So simple things like trying to make sure that if subs are going to keep going, you know, if they're in appropriate spots to do that, that you stagger them so they're not, you know, there aren't like multiple subs on site at one time. But we've also just been trying to be super flexible with everybody. You know, one of our drywallers, you know, they've got someone who's got who's more at risk on the immune system front, and so, you know, they're trying to keep him in places where it will only be him and nobody else around for 24, 48 hours or whatever. And so trying to reach out to your subs and just or subs that are on this call to just talk to builders and really try to come to agreements that make sense for everybody, I think is really key. But we've gotten really good communication, and same thing on cellulose installers and stuff like that. So I think that's been absolutely critical for us, is just that communication and really reaching deep. I think where it's going to be a bigger challenge is on larger projects or projects that have really strict contracts. We need to find ways to loosen some of those things up, because I think that's what a lot of people are up against. They're like, look, we've got deadlines. We go over deadlines, we're going to start paying money. So what do we do? You know, I mean, you know, there's so much forgiveness being done, which is great on the federal and state level now to free up the general populace. But there's a lot of these construction agreements and stuff out there that I'm sure people are coming up against that have a lot of stipulations around timelines and deliverables. And we got to find a way to develop forgiveness, I think, in our industry around this, because by the looks of it, we're going to be in some form of this for 12 to 18 months. You know, this isn't going away in a month. You know, the extreme action that we need to take now is going to last for how long it's going to last, but we're going to be dealing with the repercussions of this and, you know, peaks and valleys for the next year or better. So I think we got to start developing these things so that people, you know, can still get work done and not, you know, be held up in lawsuits.
Yeah.
If I could say something to this here. Sorry, Mike.
Yeah, no, go ahead, Mike.
We're kind of, I don't want to say California is the epicenter, but we're definitely kind of high profile for this in the country at the moment. So our entire county is under shelter in place. Actually, most of California is shelter in place, excluding San Diego, which for some reason, I had a Zoom consultation with 2 builders down there this morning, and one of them went to a job site with crews on it and then kept through the meeting on his phone, drove back to the office, and a full office of people. And I don't know, but a couple aspects of this is that even though housing has been deemed essential here, the lumber yards are only open 4 hours a day at this point. So even trying to coordinate deliveries for anybody or being able to go into the shops is throwing wrenches into everybody's curves. And the other thing is that the city hall and the permitting offices are not closed. You're not allowed to go into city hall. So they have someone at the desk, but you're not allowed to go in and actually talk to a person face to face. If anybody's having issues with permitting department, so they actually have to go in and talk to somebody, we're not able to do that here. So the normal daily practices of, I'll just pop in and talk to Steve and ask him a question about this and see if we can get it through. We can't do that now. So these little things that would have been unanticipated have thrown wrenches into everybody's operations. And something you said earlier too about maybe having this every now and again just to touch base with people. This is my first time being in this group. I know a few of you guys from way back when, Dan and Kate, but I don't know how many people were around in 2008, but it would have been really nice to have some support groups in 2008 as the world was falling apart back then too. I was fortunate, but I know a lot of guys weren't, and the world wasn't as virtual then. The support from people, as I forgot who was speaking just previously from Emerald, but this will probably reverberate for quite a few months. Just like a blip in the schedule, and everyone says, "Oh, this will throw things off for a week." It's usually 3 weeks. Well, this is probably going to be a compounding effect similarly. So the virtual support's nice.
No, that's good to hear. No, we can figure it out. Maybe it's building science 1 out of every 4 weeks, just because that'll be relatively fun. No, I mean I think there are going to be silver linings here. In 12 or 18 months or 2 years, whenever it takes to get through the recession that's going to follow this, I think those of us who think the way we all do, I think we'll be able to see and maybe help steer some practices that will work in our, I think things could look a little more like we would like them to look in a few years, but there's the short-term issues to deal with in the meantime. Anybody else? Kat or Alex, do you guys have anything you wanna add? Or you? Hi, Kat. Anybody else want to add anything about what they're doing or what their worries are, or if they have any other bit of advice or experience or what they're seeing where they are? Actually,
yeah. So I'm not a builder. I'm an architect in rural Maine, and I just started putting out feelers for more diversified work. So my social media posts, my marketing have been about. I developed this new program that we can do from your house, and we can get to a certain point at least until we're allowed to start leaving our houses and have more public contact. So I listened to the Entree Architect podcast actually about how to build an architecture business that survives a recession, and that was extremely helpful. Dan Gibson is shaking his head. I got you on gallery. I can see all of you.
Sorry, my wife asked me a question in the background.
Well, I didn't do that. You cut out. And I think one positive thing that could come out of this, and maybe I'm freezing right now, but is that I've just told people that I'm not scheduling in-person meetings anymore, and people who were previously maybe not so tech savvy and not comfortable with that are being forced to do video chats instead of in-person meetings. And so I think it could, you know, if people start becoming more comfortable with technology, could help in the future. Maybe cut back on some travel time for the rest of us. I don't know. Maybe just being stupid optimistic. Anyway, that's all I got.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with Zoom or other sort of remote access things being the new norm, at least for the near future, and I think once we all get used to it over the next couple of months, I think we're going to find it's actually one of those things that if you can do a meeting over Zoom, then why would you go to a site and drive your car and pollute the environment and all that? I sent you all a 2-page Zoom tutorial thing, but that's from a friend and former client of mine. He has also just announced he's doing a 1-hour training. He's a really good he's a professional meeting facilitator. He should be the one running a meeting like this. Just that's what he does. He's really good at it. And he's in a week from today, he's planning to do a 1-hour training. Suggested fee of between $20 and $80, but it's a sliding fee, whatever you want to pay. I can send out that link if anybody else is interested in just helping to be a Zoom expert. And I think, and I talked to him yesterday to help prepare us for today, and I think that this is very common for people to, even relatively technically competent people, stumble on some of the Zoom details. But if anybody's interested, I can send that link out.
Yeah, for us, and I'm just lucky because as an architect, a lot of my stuff is done in the office anyway, so I don't spend quite as much time on site. But it's actually been a little bit the reverse, as some of our clients who still have the money and still plan to do their projects don't have anything to do. So I've had to turn my email off so they don't drive me crazy all day long, which has been kind of an interesting, like, oh yeah, right. But it's also the introvert's dream to just basically stay at home all the time. And so then I've been doing Zoom meetings for a long time. Maybe it's just Maine. A lot of my clients don't live here anyway, so they've been kind of logging on to Zoom. But it's been a really great tool where they're looking at the same thing that you are, because you have the drawing set or whatever pulled up on the screen. So for me, Zoom meetings are almost better than in-person meetings anyway, because you can see them and you can screen share, and then they can hold up something that they found in a magazine that they liked or whatever. So it's for me the opportunity to say, okay, here's this opportunity to transition into something different. How do we take advantage of that? And so I do think, Mike, that if I can manage it to go to all virtual meetings from now on and not get in my car. I know it won't happen. Everybody wants to meet with me in Cumberland, but it's been really nice to just be here and working and load up a Zoom meeting. And Zoom is how I do all of my podcast recordings. And so it's been great in the building science community to get to meet a lot of you people who don't live here in Maine and can't come to some of these events. So I fully support doing, continued, some building science, some just, get together, hang out for an hour and keep connected.
Yeah. So we usually do these meetings for about an hour. We've gone a little over an hour and a half. So I think it's probably time, and people want to have dinner or something. I don't know, but it's any last thoughts from anybody before we sign off and start thinking about the next one?
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Ray DeRosa. I am a carpenter and a student at Emerald University, and so grateful and proud to be in this company that's small and supporting us through this as much as they possibly can, which is so awesome, and I'm very grateful. I wanted to express my gratitude to Reggie, John, and everyone in the industry that's doing this for their employees. We're all navigating through this on our own, and I love this Zoom and Google Meet. It's awesome. Something that I gotta, bow down to people that could sit at their desk as much as they do. This is what, third, fourth day of my school. And, you know, I'm also a massage therapist, so I'm like really aware of my body, and my back was hurting, my forearm. And so I'm encouraging everyone to modify their desk to a stand-up desk if they haven't, and, you know, use your building skills with that and see what else we could do to stay healthy and keep our immune system going during these trialing times. And this is great, and I hope it continues. Thank you.
I second that. Thank you very much, Mike and Emily.
Yes, thanks. Thanks, Patrick. I hope you guys hang in there okay out there.
I've been trying to get everything. I've been pulling stuff from chat, and I'm trying to get everything that everybody says, but definitely go in, and if there's a point that's missing, just add it. I've made it, I think, editable for everybody. So just throw it right in there.
Awesome. Thanks so much, John. That's great.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Be
See you,
safe and be
Matt.
well.